the shadow of crumbling towers, where the air still smells of gunpowder, two souls walk paths drenched in blood and hope. Kai, a soldier at 19, carries a rifle in one hand and his father's dog tags in the other, their weight a reminder of generations lost to the same war. Lena, 17, hides letters inside hollowed books, ink smudged with fingerprints, each word a plea for peace in a language her leaders call treason. She moves like a ghost through checkpoints, her mission known only to the dead city whispering her name. The ambush erupted at dusk, a symphony of chaos, rifles cracking like dry bones, smoke clotting the air. Kai's unit moved as one machine, boots crushing glass and debris, their shouts sharp and rehearsed. Rebel trucks skidded into the square, doors flung open, men scrambling for cover. Kai's finger hovered over the trigger, his pulse a drumbeat of instinct, his father's voice in his ear. Shoot first. Hesitation kills. But then he saw her, a flicker of movement behind a collapsed archway. Lena, crouched low, her coat too large, her hands clutching a satchel to her chest like a child's doll. A rebel, a civilian, her eyes locked with his, wide and unblinking, not with rage, but a raw, animal fear. Behind her, a grenade boomed, shaking the earth. Rubble rained down. Someone screamed, "Advance!" Kai's rifle trembled. He counted the reasons to fire: orders, survival, the war's unspoken rule, any stranger is the enemy. But her satchel slipped open, papers spilling out, not weapons. A leaf of ink-smudged words fluttered near his boot. Cease fire. Dialogue. Tomorrow. His breath hitched. The commander's voice barked orders. A rebel lunged from a truck, knife glinting. Kai fired not at her. The rebel fell. Lena scrambled backward, vanishing into smoke. Later Kai would lie, say he saw nothing. But in that split second, he'd chosen her life over the only truth he'd ever known. The note haunted him. Days passed, battles blurred, but her face lingered, the way she'd mouthed thank you before fleeing. Guilt festered. Was she a spy, a fool? One midnight he slipped from the barracks, past snoring soldiers, into the skeletal remains of the city. The hollow tree stood where rebels once hung traitors, its trunk split by lightning. He shoved a scrap of paper inside, smeared with a question he couldn't voice aloud. Why were you there? No name. No rank. Just a charcoal scrawl. For 3 days he checked, heart racing, until her reply appeared, a torn page from a medical manual, words crammed in the margins. Why did you spare me? Her handwriting was hurried, jagged, like she'd written in the dark. Kai answered on the back of a ration label, left under a brick near the bombed-out school. You looked lost. She fired back, hidden in a rusted ammo box. Lost? I was exactly where I needed to be. Their words grew bolder. She called him soldier, he called her scribe. He admitted he'd never read poetry. She confessed she'd never fired a gun. They argued about mercy, about duty, about whether the war had devoured every good thing. He left a peach pit from his last decent meal. She left a thistle flower, its purple bruised but alive. Each exchange was a gamble. A scout could have seen, an informant could have traced the ink. Yet they kept writing, carving a fragile bridge between trenches, one question at a time. Who taught you to fight? Who taught you to hope? Do you believe in peace? Do you believe in us? The answers didn't matter. It was the asking that kept them human. The library became their cathedral, its shattered dome framing a sky too vast for the war to touch. Kai arrived first, always, pacing the cracked mosaic floor, counting minutes like bullets. Lena brought books, waterlogged novels, scorched dictionaries, and read aloud passages about forests that no longer existed, oceans none of them had seen. He'd never admit it, but he memorized her voice, the way it softened on words like horizon or mercy. She teased him for his rations, stale crackers, canned meat, but ate anyway, her hunger a quiet rebellion. One night she found a piano key in the rubble, placed it in his palm. It's middle C, she said. The note everything else leans on. He didn't understand, but kept it in his pocket, rubbing its edges during patrols. They argued about the war. You're killing for a border that keeps shifting, she said. And you're risking your life for paper, he fired back. But their anger always crumbled. She showed him letters from the front, a nurse begging for medicine, a drafted farmer's ode to his unborn child. Kai, in turn, confessed the weight of his first kill, how the man's eyes had mirrored his own. Lena's fingers brushed his wrist, a touch lighter than ash. "We're not doomed," she whispered. "Not yet." They carved their initials into a broken pillar, a secret pact. When mortar fire echoed nearby, they'd duck instinctively, then laugh, nerves frayed but alive. He taught her to disassemble a rifle blindfolded. She recited poems until his hands stopped shaking. One dusk, she arrived breathless, a fresh cut on her cheek. "They're watching me," she said. But they stayed anyway, sharing a single chocolate bar, its sweetness a rebellion. Lena's letters became a fever. The medic, a grizzled woman with a daughter in the trenches, smuggled them in body bags. The shopkeeper, whose sons were shot for deserting, pinned one to his boarded window. "We are not beasts," scrawled in blue ink. A schoolteacher read them to orphans in a basement, children who'd never known peace but now hummed the words like lullabies. Hope was contagious, reckless. A baker hid rolls with letters baked inside. A mechanic etched phrases onto bullet casings. But the war's generals smelled the shift. Propaganda posters screamed traitors among us. Radio broadcasts twisted Lena's words. Ceasefire became cowardice, dialogue became defeat. Kai's commander summoned him, a dossier slamming the desk. Photos of Lena at the library, Lena handing a letter to the medic, Lena's shadow under the hollow tree. "This is your girl," the commander sneered, lighting a cigar with a page from her journal. "Pathetic. Love makes you weak." That night, Kai found Lena burning her drafts in an oil drum, flames eating words like forgiveness and tomorrow. She pressed the letter into his hands, unfinished, smudged. "When this ends, meet me where the rivers aren't poisoned. Bring the piano key." He kissed her then, salt and smoke, both tasting fear. The next dawn, soldiers raided the bakery. The shopkeeper's body hung from his own storefront, Lena's letter nailed through his palm. The medic vanished. The orphan's basement was shelled. Lena wept as Kai held her, her sobs muffled against his chest. "They'll kill us all," she said. "Then let them try," he growled, his father's dog tags cold against his skin. The war had made its move. Now so would they. The commander's office reeked of antiseptic and arrogance, walls papered with maps marked in red ink, enemy zones, lost territories, graves. Kai stood rigid, his father's dog tags digging into his collarbone, as the man circled him like a vulture. "You think I don't know?" The commander's breath smelled of stale cigars and rot. "Your father stood here once, boy. Begged me to spare a village. Weakness cost him his life." A photo slid across the desk, Kai's father, younger, kneeling in mud, a bullet hole blooming in his chest. "You carry his name, his gun, his mistakes." The commander leaned close, scarred face twisting. "That girl's letters are infecting the ranks. Medics refusing orders. Boys deserting. You let this rot spread, and every death is yours." Kai's fists clenched, nails drawing blood. The commander softened, voice syrupy. "Your mother still tends her garden." Yes, a chill shot through Kai. "Such pretty hydrangeas. Would hate for a mortar to misfire." That night, Kai vomited in the barracks latrine, his reflection gaunt in the cracked mirror. He found Lena's latest note sewn into his coat lining: "Meet me at the river. Bring bandages." He went, not for her, but for the hydrangeas. She was there, stitching a wound on a rebel's arm, her hand steady. "They're targeting families," she said, not looking up. "Mine too." He didn't tell her about the garden. Instead, he bandaged a stranger's leg, hands shaking. "Why do you trust me?" Lena's needle paused. "Because you still ask why." The dream draft burned into Kai's mind long after Lena set it aflame. "I want a garden where we bury guns, not bodies. Where the dirt grows food, not shrapnel." He'd found it in her coat pocket, ink blurred by rain, while she bartered with a smuggler for penicillin. Her network was crumbling. The baker's wife was dragged into the square, screaming as soldiers shoved her mouth with charred bread. "Eat your treason!" The schoolteacher swung from a lamppost, Lena's letters stuffed in his pockets. Children spat on his boots. Traitor! Kai watched, his commander's laughter in his ear. See what hope does that night, Lena unraveled. They're using my words to hang people. She hurled the inkwell at the wall, black splatter like a wound. I should have stayed silent. Kai gripped her shoulders. Silence killed my father. She flinched. For the first time, he spoke of the photo, the hydrangeas, the unmarked grave. Lena's tears cut tracks through dust. We're the same. She pressed the seed packet into his hand. Tomatoes, carrots, lavender. From my mother's garden. They'll grow anywhere. He buried them under their initials in the library pillar. Days later, the commander found the packet, dirt still under Kai's nails. Pathetic, he spat, crushing seeds under his boot. You'll watch her die. That night, Kai stole a grenade from the armory. Lena wrote a final letter, unsigned. Tell them I chose the garden. They didn't know who'd live to deliver it. The war's tempo quickened, a drumbeat of dread. Lena's allies, doctors, farmers, starveling teens with Molotovs, were cornered in the eastern foothills, their radios silent, their supply lines severed. She learned of the ambush from a boy with a broken jaw, his words garbled as he spat blood into her hands. Tomorrow, at dawn, they'll burn us all. She waited until midnight, stole a soldier's coat 2 sizes too large, and crept through sewage tunnels to Kai's barracks. The guards were drunk, laughing about a rumor, rebels eating rats to survive. She slipped past, her heartbeat louder than her footsteps. Kai slept fitfully, his father's dog tags clenched in his fist. She shook him awake, her palm clamped over his mouth. They'll die tomorrow. You can stop it. He stared at her, eyes bleary with nightmares. How she unrolled a map, its edges frayed, marked with red XS, a medic camp, a cellar of children, coordinates his unit would raise. Redirect the strike. Fake a malfunction. Lie. He recoiled. They'll court-martial me. Lena's voice turned blade sharp. Or you'll court-martial your soul. She pressed a dried hydrangea into his hand, stolen from his mother's garden. You think you're protecting her, they'll burn her alive once they're done with me. Outside, boots clattered. She fled, her shadow melting into the dark. Kai lay awake, the flower crumbling in his grip. Dawn approached. He thought of the commander's smirk, the photo of his father's corpse, the seed packet crushed under a boot. At roll call, he swallowed bile as the commander barked, "Show no mercy." The helicopters roared. Kai's finger hovered over the coordinates input. The cellar. The children. He deleted a digit. The screen blinked. Error. He did it again. Error. A private frowned. Sergeant Kai's voice cracked. Systems glitched. Use the backup logs. The wrong coordinates loaded. No one questioned him. No one ever did. The helicopters struck empty fields. Rebels watched from caves, baffled, as flames consumed nothing but snow. By noon, the commander's face was volcanic. Sabotage! He screamed, backhanding a technician. Find the error. Kai scrubbed engine grease off his hands, lungs tight. The medic who'd smuggled Lena's letters limped into camp, her arm bandaged, her gaze searing into Kai. You saved them, she mouthed. He looked away. That night the commander stormed the barracks, an intercepted letter in his fist. Recognized as Kai's blood froze. Lena's handwriting, the garden grows where the gun falls, and a small drawing of a hydrangea. The commander grinned, wolfish. Found it in the medic's pocket. She's talking. Soldiers dragged her in, her face a pulped mess. Who gave you this? The commander crooned, pressing a knife to her throat. Kai's legs moved before his mind. I did. The room stilled. The medic's good eye widened. Pathetic, the commander spat. You'll fix your mistake. Tomorrow, you'll lead the squad to finish the job. Kill every rebel. Bring me the courier's head. The medic was shot at dawn. Kai knelt beside her body, her blood soaking his knees. She gripped a seed in her fist, lavender. He pried it loose, buried it under his tongue. That afternoon, he packed extra ammo, a serrated knife, his father's dog tags. Lena's last note burned in his pocket, Meet me where the rivers aren't poisoned. He'd go to the ambush. But not for the war. For the garden. The commander's rage was a living thing, pulsing in the war room's fluorescent glare. He hurled the intercepted letter onto the table, Lena's hydrangea sketch glaring up like an accusation. You let rebels slip through your fingers, boy. You let her slip. Soldiers flanked Kai, their breath hot on his neck, as the commander dissected the evidence. A smudged fingerprint on the page, a timestamp matching Kai's patrol, the medic's seed still lodged in his boot tread. You think I'm a fool? The commander slid a dossier across the table. Photos of Kai's mother tending her garden, Lena's siblings in a refugee camp, a red circle around a girl who shared her eyes. One word, and the next bomb falls on them. Kai's throat closed. The room stank of sweat and diesel. You'll fix this, the commander purred, handing him a sniper rifle. Track her. Kill her. Bring me her notebook. A soldier spat at Kai's feet. Traitor lover. Outside, the unit loaded trucks, their laughter jagged. He'll cry when he pulls the trigger, bet he'll miss on purpose. Kai cleaned the rifle methodically, his mind replaying Lena's voice. The garden grows where the gun falls. At dusk, they rolled out, Kai in the lead, coordinates burning his palm. Lena's last meeting spot, the library. The commander's jeep followed, a shadow. I'll be watching, boy. One flaw, one flinch, and your mother's roses burn. Lena stood in the library's corpse, moonlight slicing through cracks. She'd risked everything to come, disabled checkpoints, bribed a sniper with her father's pocket watch, left false trails in the sewers. Her satchel held the last letters, each stamped with names of the dead, the baker, the medic, the schoolteacher. For the survivors, she'd written. For the ones who still look up. Footsteps echoed. She turned, hope flaring, but froze at the rifle on Kai's back. His face was a mask, eyes hollow as the bombed-out chapel. You came, she whispered. He didn't move. They're watching us. She stepped closer, her boot crushing a fallen book. The letters worked. The Eastern Battalion agreed to talks. Kai's jaw twitched. It's a trap. They'll shoot the negotiators. Lena gripped his arm. Then we run. Now. Together. He flinched. Outside, engines idled. A scope glinted in a shattered window. They have my family, he breathed. Yours too, she said, pulling a photo from her coat. Her siblings, alive, hidden in a cellar. I protected them. Let me protect you. A shout ruptured the silence. Traitors. The commander's voice. Boots pounded. Lena pressed a letter into Kai's hand. Read it. Now. He unfolded it, the paper trembling. Her handwriting. Kai, if you're reading this, you've already chosen. Forgive me. A gun cocked. The library doors splintered. The commander's voice clawed through the library's ruins, sharpened by decades of bloodshed. Bring me their heads. Boots hammered the rubble outside, a dozen men fanning out, rifles sweeping beams of light through shattered windows. Kai's training screamed at him, secure the exits. Take high ground. Neutralize the threat. But Lena stood frozen, her back to the pillar where they'd carved their initials, her fingers clutching the unfinished letter. You have to go, he hissed, shoving her toward a gap in the wall. She resisted. Not without you. Shadows shifted in the doorway. A soldier's laugh ricocheted off the rubble. Found the lovebirds. Kai grabbed Lena's wrist, yanking her into a sprint as bullets chewed the ground behind them. The commander's jeep skidded into the square, headlights pinning them like moths. Alive! He bellowed. I want them alive! A rookie soldier raised his rifle, eager to impress. The commander backhanded him. You think death's the worst punishment inside the jeep. A radio crackled with updates, checkpoints sealed, rooftops manned, the city strangled into a cage. Kai dragged Lena into an alley, their lungs raw. They'll torture us, she panted. They'll make you watch. He didn't answer. Ahead, a rusted gate hung ajar. Beyond it, the river swollen, black, swirling with debris. Swim, he ordered. She shook her head. I can't. A flare burst overhead, painting the alley crimson. Soldiers bayed like hounds. There, Lena's satchel ripped as Kai pulled her through the gate, letters cascading into the mud. My maps, leave them! He hauled her toward the water, but she twisted free, scrambling for the papers. They're proof we tried. A bullet sparked off the gate. Kai tackled her into the shallows as automatic fire shredded the riverbank. The icy current swallowed them, their clothes leaden, their hands clawing for purchase. Lena surfaced, gasping, ink from the dissolving letters staining the water like smoke. The bridge, she coughed. Undermined, he spat, dragging her toward a collapsed pier. They hauled themselves onto splintered wood, the commander's floodlights scanning the shore. Check the bodies. Voices neared. Lena trembled violently, her lips blue. They'll find us. Kai pried a rotted plank loose, revealing a hollow beneath the pier, a child's hideout, stuffed with moldy toys. In here. They squeezed into the stench of damp and decay, their bodies pressed so close he felt her heartbeat against his ribs. Above, boots stomped the pier. Blood here! A soldier called. They're close. Lena's breath hitched. Kai clamped a hand over her mouth. The commander's shadow loomed over the water. You think this ends with you, he shouted to the dark. Your mother's house burns tonight, boy. Her roses, her photos, her bones. Kai's grip tightened. Lena's tears dripped onto his palm. A rat scuttled over their legs. The soldiers paced. Check the water. A shot rang. Lena jerked. A dark bloom spread across her sleeve. Go, she mouthed, shoving him. He held fast. The pier creaked. A boot descended through a crack, dust raining on their faces. The screen fades. The river whispers. Somewhere, a garden drowns. Blood bloomed across Lena's sleeve, dark and insistent, as Kai dragged her deeper into the cellar's throat. The air reeked of wet earth and rusted pipes, the floor littered with rat carcasses and moldy grain sacks. Lena slumped against the wall, her breast shallow, her fingers fumbling with the locket. Take it, she gasped. Inside were two faces, her brother, gap-toothed at 7, her sister clutching a doll with no eyes. They're in the north. If you live, tell them I tried. Kai pressed his palm to her wound, warmth seeping through fabric. You'll tell them yourself. Her laugh was a wheeze. Liar. Above, boots stomped, methodical, relentless. The commander's voice slithered through cracks. You hear that, boy, your mother's house is ash. Her roses kindling. Kai's gut twisted. He saw it, the porch where she shelled peas, the hydrangeas his father planted, all smoke now. Lena gripped his wrist. Don't listen. He's lying. But doubt festered. The commander knew the weight of guilt. Your sister's next, he crooned. Then the baby. Lena's locket bit into Kai's palm. He's baiting you. Stay here. Footsteps paused overhead. A soldier's radio squawked, flare sighted east. Possible rebel movement. The cellar door groaned. Lena shoved Kai into a crevice, her bloodied hand smearing the wall. Don't move. She limped toward the stairs, her shadow long and unsteady. Lena, quiet. She picked up a brick, her face pale but defiant. The door crashed open. A silhouette filled the frame, not the commander, but a rookie, trembling, rifle raised. Lena lunged, brake swinging. The gun clattered. They grappled, the boy's yelps muffled by her hand. Kai surged forward, knife drawn, but froze. The rookie was 16, maybe. Acne on his cheeks. Lena pinned him, her knee on his chest. Please, the boy whimpered. They took my brother. Lena's grip faltered. Kai saw the choice, kill him, and by minutes. Spare him, and risk everything. Lena snatched the boy's dog tags, Private Eli Voss, and hurled them into the dark. Run. Tell them you never saw us. The boy scrambled up, vanishing. Lena sagged. He'll betray us. Maybe, she said. But I'm done adding ghosts to this war. The commander's patience snapped. Enough games. He kicked the cellar door off its hinges, his silhouette backlit by floodlights, a pistol in one hand, a photo in the other. Recognized as Kai's mother, her hair singed, wrists bound, kneeling in cinders. Say hello? The commander held a radio to the door. Static, then a whimper. Kai, his mother's voice. I'm sorry, a gunshot. The radio died. Kai roared, surging forward, but soldiers tackled him, rifle butts cracking ribs. Lena screamed, clawing at their backs. Monsters! The commander crouched, eye level with Kai. This is war, boy. You don't get to love. He tossed the photo, Kai's mother's body, her garden burning behind her. Now. Prove you're not your father. The pistol pressed into Kai's hand, still warm from the kill. Lena knelt nearby, a soldier's boot on her neck. Do it, the commander whispered. Put a bullet in her, and I'll let you bury what's left of your family. Kai's finger found the trigger. Lena met his gaze, no fear, only sorrow. Choose the garden, she mouthed. The cellar held its breath. Kai's mind fractured. His father's corpse, the hydrangea ashes, the locket's weight. Lena's letters flashed behind his eyes. We are not beasts. The commander smirked. Do it. Kai's arm swung, not at Lena, but upward, the pistol's muzzle kissing the commander's throat. The garden grows here, he hissed. A shot rang. The commander's eyes bulged, blood bubbling over his medals. Chaos erupted. Soldiers froze, leaderless. Lena lunged for a rifle. Now! She screamed. But the screen fades here, on the trigger's echo, on the locket glinting in the dirt, on the war holding its breath, for mercy or massacre. The ending is a question. The audience must answer. The commander's body slumped, a puppet severed from its strings, blood pooling around his medals like a grotesque halo. For a heartbeat, the cellar froze, soldiers staring at their dead leader, rifles slack in their hands, the hierarchy that had governed their nightmares dissolving. Lena scrambled for the fallen pistol, her fingers slick with the commander's blood, but a sergeant lunged, pinning her wrist. Traitor! He roared, spittle flying. Kai moved on instinct, driving his knife into the man's thigh, the blade grating against bone. The sergeant howled, collapsing. Chaos erupted. Two privates dragged Kai back, their grips vice-like, while another soldier hauled Lena up by her hair. Who's in charge now? Someone shouted. The protocol's dead. A corporal barked, his face twitching with panic. Outside, the mob's roar swelled, rebels with torches, townsfolk with pitchforks, all converging on the cellar. A brick shattered the last intact window. Burn them out! A woman screamed. They killed my son! Inside, the soldiers fractured. Some leveled rifles at the door. Others dropped their weapons, stripping insignias from uniforms. We're not dying for a corpse. A private fled up the stairs, only to be met by rebel gunfire. His body tumbled back down. Lena writhed in her captor's grip, teeth sinking into his hand. He released her with a curse. She crawled to Kai, pressing the locket into his palm. The back opens. Inside, folded smaller than a bullet, was a map, a route north, her siblings' coordinates. Go. Now. Kai shook his head. Together. The cellar door shuddered under axe blows. A soldier wept, clutching a photo of his newborn. Another prayed to a god he mocked hours before. The corporal raised a grenade. We go on our terms. Lena tackled him, the grenade rolling into a corner. Soldiers dove for cover. Kai pulled her into a supply closet, shelves rattling as the blast shook the room. Smoke choked the air. Screams. Silence. Then, the rebels poured in. The mob's fury was a wildfire, feeding on decades of loss. Kai and Lena were dragged into the square, hands bound, forced to kneel beside the commander's body. A rebel leader, a woman with a scarred scalp and a preacher's cadence, strode forward. These two sold us to the wolves. She thundered, holding up Lena's letters. Their pretty words delayed our vengeance. The crowd seethed. A man hurled a rock, grazing Lena's temple. Peace is poison. A boy no older than 12 aimed a pistol at Kai. My father died because of you. Lena shouted over the din. The letters were to stop the killing. Liar! The rebel woman backhanded her. You bought time for the enemy. She turned to the mob. Let their lover choose. Him or her. The crowd took up the chant. Choose. Choose. Kai's binds cut into his wrists. Lena's face was a mask of blood and defiance. Do it, she whispered. Live. The rebel woman pressed a knife into Kai's fist. Cut her throat, or we'll carve your heart out slow. The blade trembled. Memories collided. His mother's ashes, Lena's laughter in the library, the hydrangea crushed under a boot. The mob leaned in, breathless. Lena tilted her head, exposing her throat. Make it count. Kai's grip tightened. The rebel woman smirked. All soldiers break. But then, Lena's voice, soft as their first meeting. The garden, Kai. Choose the garden. The knife flashed. The crowd surged. The screen drowns in shadows. Only the locket remains, glinting in the mud, its map fluttering like a white flag. Who fell, who lived, war doesn't care. But the audience must. The knife's edge glinted, a sliver of light in the square's suffocating dark. Kai's hand trembled, not from fear, but the weight of lifetimes. His father's ghost in the dog tags, his mother's ashes in the wind, Lena's breath warm against the blade. The mob's chant swelled, choose. Choose. But time fractured. A rebel child, no older than Lena's sister, hurled a rock that grazed Kai's temple. Blood trickled, mingling with sweat. Lena's eyes never left his. Do it, she mouthed, her voice lost in the roar. The rebel leader leaned in, her scarred face alight with triumph. Cut her, and we'll spare you. A fair trade. Behind her, a soldier from Kai's unit, Private Rin, who'd once shared cigarettes and jokes about desertion, raised a shaky camera, its red light blinking. For the archives, he muttered. Proof of justice. Kai's mind raced. The locket's map burned in his pocket. North. Safety. Her siblings. But the blade hovered. Lena's lips moved soundless. The garden. The crowd's frenzy peaked. A woman screamed, My boy died for your lies, and hurled a shoe. A soldier, his arm bandaged from the cellar blast, cocked his rifle at Lena's skull. Do it or I will. Kai's muscles coiled. The knife jerked, not toward Lena, but into his own palm, a deep, visceral gash. Blood splattered the rebel leader's boots. I choose neither, he growled. The mob inhaled, stunned. Lena lunged, teeth sinking into the soldier's wrist. His rifle clattered. Kai snatched it, swinging the butt into the rebel leader's jaw. Chaos detonated. The mob surged. A grenade pin clinked somewhere. Private Ren's camera toppled, lens cracking. Traitors! Martyrs! The square became a maelstrom of fists and gunfire. Kai hauled Lena through the thrashing crowd, her bound hands slick with his blood. A teenage rebel slashed at Kai's leg with a bayonet. A shopkeeper he'd once spared yanked Lena's hair. You poisoned us with hope. Kai headbutted him, tasting iron. They reached the square's edge, where the commander's jeep sat abandoned, keys dangling. Lena fumbled with the ignition. Go! Bullets pinged the hood. Kai floored the gas, the wheels crushing a tangle of propaganda posters. Death to traitors! Peace is a lie! In the rearview, the mob turned its rage inward, rebels and soldiers clubbing each other, the grenade's blast lighting the night. Lena unraveled her binds with her teeth. Your hand, drive, he hissed. North. The locket's map, but headlights pierced the smoke behind them. 2 trucks, bristling with guns. Faster. The jeep careened through the corpse of the city, its engine screaming, wheels bouncing over craters. Lena clutched the locket, her fingers tracing her siblings' faces. Left here! She yelled, pointing to a bridge half swallowed by the river. Kai swerved, the jeep's undercarriage scraping stone. The trucks gained, gunfire chewing the rear bumper. They'll follow us north, Lena panted. We'll lead them to the kids. Kai's hand bled freely, the steering wheel slippery. Then we don't go north. He veered toward the eastern cliffs, where the road disintegrated into a jagged spine of rock. What's there? Lena asked. The edge, he said. The trucks loomed, headlights blinding. A bullet shattered the Jeep's mirror. Lena rummaged under the seat, pulling out a rusted flare gun. Last resort, the commander had called it. She cranked the window open, wind whipping her hair. When I say swerve, Kai didn't ask. Trust had become their language. The lead truck roared alongside, a soldier leaning out with a shotgun. Now! Kai yanked the wheel left, metal screeching as the Jeep sideswiped the truck. Lena fired the flare into its open window. A scream. The truck swerved, flipped, and exploded against a boulder. The second truck braked hard, but momentum carried it into the wreck. Flames licked the night. The Jeep sped on, cliffs yawning ahead. Stop! Lena cried. Kai stomped the brakes. The Jeep skidded, teetering on the precipice. Below, the river churned, swallowing the fire's reflection. Distant shouts echoed, survivors from the trucks, regrouping. Lena gripped Kai's arm. We jump? He stared at her. It's a graveyard. She kissed him, fierce and final. So's the land? They climbed onto the hood, the Jeep groaning under their weight. The locket swung from Lena's neck, catching moonlight. For the garden, she said. They leapt. The trucks arrived, soldiers peering over the edge. See them nothing. Just water. The river roared on. Somewhere downstream, a hand breached the surface, grasping. A glint of silver. Then dark. The war yawns, endless. But in the mud, a lavender seed sprouts.